Who the hell is Isabelle Garino? This week, I'm sharing my history and how I ended up as the COO and owner of my business, Residential Assisted Living Academy. From grade school rejection to double majoring and being a broke flight attendant to cashing over $1 million in sales and running a multi-million-dollar business, this is my story. Let's dive in.
You're smart, you're motivated, you want to do something big. You're on the verge of being a young boss, and we're going to help you get there. I'm your host, Isabelle Garino, and welcome to the Young Boss Podcast, where youth is your power.
My entrepreneurial journey really began back in college. Not that I knew I wanted to be a business owner or even work in a family business, actually far from it, but this was the beginning for two reasons. I was a double major, double minor, and I took 18 to 22 credits each semester and did summer school. I had an insane workload and a workload that would begin to prepare me for the long days and nights of being a business owner. And second, I really believe that everything happens for a reason and that one thing leads to another. College was the first stop in me figuring out what to do with my life, what I liked and what I didn't like. I really didn't know why I pushed so hard in college, but it's probably because I get bored easily and I felt like if I'm going to do this whole college thing, then I may as well go hard at it. I tried to take as many online classes as possible so I could also work two jobs and be on the leadership board of my sorority. You know, you got to work hard and play hard. But while I was in school, I worked as a nanny Monday through Friday, 2 to 7 p.m. and sometimes on the weekends. And I also worked at school in one of the club's departments. So a few days a week for a few hours, I was also doing that on-campus job. I never intended to use my degree. Honestly, I just wanted to be a mom and a wife, and that was my dream. But I got a full ride scholarship, so it felt stupid not to go. And ironically enough, my dad discouraged me from going to college. He was always one of those like, you don't need this, you can go build your own thing, right? Because I wasn't really planning on using my degree for anything, it wasn't until I started using my natural God-given skills that my mindset changed about work and what I wanted to do. But while I was in school, I was fortunate enough to do the Disney College internship in Orlando, Florida. And there I made besties from all across the world. I learned so much about business and leadership, and I partied way too hard. But that experience is what ultimately made me fall in love with Florida. More on that. But right before I graduated, I started dating a guy. He was a flight attendant. He loved his job and he told me so much about it. And I convinced one of my besties to do it. And she dropped out of nursing school to go all in and become a flight attendant. And she loved it too. So after school, I moved to Miami. I got selected for Teach for America. And at that time, that was all I wanted, was a reason to be back in Florida, an opportunity to get to Florida. I would find any excuse to get there. So when Teach for America approached me and I applied and I got accepted, that's a really rigorous program. And then I got based in Miami. I was like, this is my dream coming true. But I actually hated teaching. And as much as I wanted to be with the kids, because I love kids, and I wanted to make a difference, I did not want to work on lesson plans and have to do all this administrative work. So one day I was hanging out with that flight attendant guy who I was dating, and he ended up convincing me to apply since I was unhappy at Teach for America. I called my sister who was a teacher, and she said, okay, when you're going to become a flight attendant flying in the sky, do you think you're going to look down at a schoolyard and say, oh, I wish I was there? Or do you think you're going to be a teacher who sees a plane fly by and say, damn, I wish I was there? She's like, go become a flight attendant. Absolutely not. Do not become a teacher. Not that there's anything wrong with teaching, but ultimately I did end up applying and getting selected to work for US Airways. So I quit Teach for America and I did my flight attendant training, and they did not base me in Florida. They based me in Washington, D.C. Up until this point in my life, you know, it really felt like life was going to be just floating around with no direction. And somebody says, go do this, and life will just happen as it's supposed to. And I'd eventually fall into a career, even though I had never really cared about a career because that's just not what I wanted to do. When it came to money, I truly thought it was going to be good to make $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And I'm like, I'll marry a guy who makes like 60 to 70. And together, we'll be rich, 100K. Wow. Oh my God. I thought that was like normal and that's what I wanted. And, I truly had no idea what like good money was. And then I found out, and yikes, I realized that personally, I was going to need to make a whole lot more to provide the life that I wanted for myself and my future family. I had big dreams and 100K wasn't going to cut it combined. I quickly learned that being a flight attendant meant making no money and being incredibly bored. I filled my time going to the library, literally checking out 12 to 15 books at a time because I wasn't learning anything. I ended up having to give up my car because I couldn't afford it. I lived with 9 people in a 3-bedroom apartment, and then we moved with 6 people to a 2-bedroom apartment. And I started to realize that at this rate, I would never be able to afford life in DC. I really needed to figure out an area where I could afford to do this job and have a lower cost of living and really be able to survive while I thought about what was my next move, because I'm starting to, add on the years and I'm not married and I don't have that husband making $60,000 to $70,000 a year. So what am I going to do? I was able to transfer to Arizona and move back in with my parents. Now, being out of the house and living across the country, that felt like a womp, womp, womp. But being so close to them and their business, I was able to see what my dad was doing, and I began to take an interest. He had started his assisted living career while I was away in DC. Prior to that, he was just a real estate investor my entire life. So I did not know really what was going on just yet. I knew that my grandmother needed care and assistance. I knew he had started doing this, but I didn't really know what was happening. And at 23 years old, my life drastically changed. I started sneaking into my dad's office and saying, hey, how can I help you? And eventually asked him to hire me. And I started working for my dad. I did all of the things from marketing manager, social media, email copywriting, tax prep, sales, operations, phone sales, marketing, HR. Whew. I continued to move up in the company from just his assistant when there was literally 3 of us to becoming the COO and his right hand as the integrator. I helped build the businesses and I learned a lot along the way. I definitely recommend learning everything about the industry that you're going into. Me not knowing anything about this industry, it helped so much sitting in every single seat. And many times as a new business owner, you're going to be the one and only who has to sit in all those seats. It made me learn so many things and trial by fire. I also learned my strengths as well as my weaknesses. I remember one time, the first year that I was working with my dad, I was doing tax prep for him, and we only had 2 other guys at that point on the team, and they were both in sales. So I'm sitting there working 10 different jobs. My dad's out on the road doing his 10 different jobs, and we have 2 sales guys. And I'm calculating how much money they made and how much money I made and my dad and all the numbers. And when I saw their salaries, I was livid for like 48 hours. I was so livid. And I go to my dad and I'm like, why are they being paid so much more than me? They work like 8 times a year at these events and I'm working every single day slaving away. And he said, because they're 100% commission. They're taking a risk. He said, do you want to go into sales? Like you're in sales right now, but I'm not paying you commission. Do you want to go full-time commission on everything you sell? And I was like, well, no, because obviously I didn't want to take that risk. And he's like, high risk, high reward. When you want to go, let me know. Now that lesson taught me a lot because I realized in that moment that if I wanted to really increase my income, I needed to get into some kind of sales. So as I was taking, all of the phone calls, all the incoming phone calls into the business, I was just servicing them as customer service. I started taking trainings and growing my sales skills the best that I could. And I really started taking that customer service line seriously. I started turning it into a phone sales line, trying to convert all of these leads instead of just answering questions, taking a note and hanging up. I wanted to prove that I had the guts, the gumption to go take that role too. At this point, I started to realizing that my calling wasn't a specific job or a specific industry. It was using my skills. I'm extremely organized. I'm a leader, a visionary. I have so many creative ideas that are always coming up in my head. I'm extremely efficient. I'm so fast and no excuses. Everyone always says those things about me. I always knew that I had these skills, but I didn't know how they lined up with the job. Sometimes it's hard to see where your skills actually line up with what a job is. They're not always a perfect match. But if someone told me that, I would be running an assisted living or a real estate training business, I would be like, no way. That's not what I want to do. I want to do something in beauty or makeup or this or that. I would have never believed them. But when I look at the skills that it takes to do my job every day and my God-given skills, it's literally a perfect match. So it does make sense in the long run. And I think it actually makes me feel more fulfilled. When my dad passed, my role completely changed. I went from being behind the scenes and running everything in the day-to-day in all of these businesses to becoming the face of it in what felt like a matter of minutes. I went from backstage to center stage, and it was terrifying. I had all these questions and self-doubt, impostor syndrome, all of these things that really I was scared were going to hold me back. What are they going to think about me? Not just the customers, but my team. I was a bad cop for over 8 years up to this point. Every time that, my dad would need somebody to kind of fight for him or say no or do something, that was me. Now overnight, I'm the good cop. I was not prepared for that. I wasn't afraid of the job. I was honestly afraid of what other people would think. In my company, I have people take 1 million tests. I know that. But one of the tests that I always have people take is your biggest fear. Because many times your biggest fear is how you sabotage yourself or that negative voice in your head. And one of my biggest fears, and what I test as my biggest fear, is people pleasing. I've always been afraid of failing other people. And now if I'm everyone's boss and it fails, it's my fault. That's a lot of pressure and people to please and feed, right? Hey everyone, I want to share something that has truly changed my charging game. It's the 360 electrical. When I got this cord, oh my goodness, you guys, I'm always in need of a quick charge, whether I'm on the go in the car or at the airport. I want to be able to plug it in and 15 minutes later be on full battery, and that's exactly what this has done for me. It delivers 240 watts of ultra fast charging, so you're back to full battery in no time. It is perfect for those last-minute travel emergencies. It's got a super long cord and it doesn't fray. It keeps everything nice and tidy, super easy to travel with, take with you on the road. So if you want to grab yours today, head to 360electrical.com and use promo code YoungBoss for 20% off your order. Now, back to the show. In a past episode, we chatted with Natalie of Sunday Mornings, and I was feeling grief in those moments in a variety of ways. I was grieving the loss of my job, the loss of my father, my best friend, my mentor, my boss, not to mention my whole team was grieving. And I began to really feel the pressure of that situation. What if I fail the team? What if I fail my family? This pressure was tenfold. But I had to rely on my skills, my extreme organization, my leadership, my visionary ability, my efficiency, the ability to think quickly and make smart decisions at the drop of a dime. I also had the skill of public speaking, and that was going to be critical for this new role. I'd never really thought about it before that moment, but there were so many times that I had tried to be in the limelight and gotten shut down. Like back in elementary school when I had auditioned to be the angel in the school play. I memorized the entire monologue. I went to that audition. I was so proud. I had my paper that said the words on it and I said it down. And I gave that performance and I gave it with emotions and facial reactions and all of this. And I grabbed my paper at the end and I walked to my seat. The next girl who auditioned, she sat up there trembling, shaking the paper, reading it the whole time. And I didn't get chosen for the role. That second girl did. And when I went back to the teacher and asked for feedback, hey, is there, a reason I didn't get this? I worked really hard and I thought I did good. She said, oh, honey, you're not angelic enough. And that moment, it was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not good enough for this. In high school, I remember I kind of got the guts to say, hey, I think I want to try this public speaking thing again. And so I tried out for the lead role in the high school play. It was my senior year and I was so excited. Again, I worked really hard at it. I really dove into what is this role? What does this girl look like, sound like? Like I put some energy and effort into this and I went out and I did the audition and they chose another girl. And again, when I asked for feedback from the drama teacher, she said, oh, we have to go with that other girl because she's been on drama since freshman year and you can't just walk in your senior year and get it. She was slated for the role. It's like, whatever. Why would I even try out then if you know you're going to hand it to someone else? After those two experiences, and I'm sure many more of actually trying to do something in the limelight and being shut down, it started to create something in me that said, I guess I'm not this. I guess I'm not good enough. I guess other people deserve this more than me. And I grew up watching my father public speak and always teach and educate other people. I was never afraid of public speaking. I saw him and he was never afraid. What is there to be afraid of? You know, your parents teach you a whole lot about how to act in the world. And if your parent is scared to go do something, inevitably you will be scared to go do it. It felt like whenever I put myself out there, I was more often than not getting declined or turned away. And I learned to deal with rejection at a very young age, which allowed me to succeed as an adult. I developed an on to the next mindset. And as I've said before, a no is just one step closer to a yes. I ended up finding other ways to perform and be involved, such as cheer and student government and other activities where I began to learn more about leadership and apply what I had been learning from my dad within my own experiences. Leading and presenting just seemed normal to me because I always watched my dad do it and it seemed like a natural skill. The way I saw it was, what is there to be afraid of? Those skills then transitioned to college, where I kid you not, I earned a 100% in my public speaking class, which is pretty much unheard of in college. So fast forward 10 years and this full circle moment is happening. My dad had passed and now I had to assume the role of being the face of the RAL Academy. All the pressure is on me to go out there and persuade people into really buying into a concept that's going to impact the rest of their life and to make these connections that make the sales. And I did it. The first time I ever spoke on stage, I sold over $1 million, which ended up being a record at the time for sales. I finally had that confidence and that self-belief deep in my heart that I actually didn't suck at this, that it was possible for me to lead and to close sales and to shepherd the next generation within the company that my dad passionately built for all those years. For the very first time in my life, I had tried something new and I wasn't shut down or rejected. I wasn't told that I'm not good enough or that somebody else deserves it more than me. I was rewarded for my hard work and efforts and for my determination and passion. I was rewarded by leveraging skills I knew I had, but was never given the opportunity to display them. And I felt like I had proved the haters wrong. But more importantly, I had proved myself right. I had achieved a sort of self-validation. So now here we are 3 years after my father's passing, 3 years after the proverbial torch was unexpectedly handed to me. And I have to say, after some reflection, I am super grateful for my new role. I often still feel those feelings of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and some days are tough. I am not a perfect boss. I am far from it. I have failed, I've succeeded, I've made tough decisions, and I've avoided making others. I struggle to find my own way still in this business, but I am so incredibly fulfilled every day. And I'm honored to be the next up to bat, to continue to do what my father did and to be walking on the stages that he did, to share the message that he did. My father took a massive risk to become an entrepreneur, risking it all in residential assisted living, and it worked. The benefits of his hard work and his determination to make it as an entrepreneur have been twofold for my family. He left us blessings, not burdens, and he left us with cash flowing assets. He set us up. He took care of us. So now when I share his story with others, when I get to tell them about residential assisted living, it's not only about the money. It's about changing the legacy of families. It's about the transition of careers and lives from 9-to-5 jobs that barely pay the bills to becoming financially free and independent. People are breaking free of the corporate stranglehold. They can spend time with their kids, purchase the things they need and want without hesitation, and choose to live wherever they want, all while feeling proud of the work that they do and the things that they've built. And what makes it all worth it, and I've seen it myself, I've experienced it myself, is that when they pass on, their kids will be left with something so powerful, almost guaranteeing them passion, purpose, and wealth for the rest of their days. The money is strictly a leverage point. It's a way to secure futures, not to gloat about material things or fancy vacations. At the end of the day, I want people to feel empowered, to set themselves up and their families up for success, to begin to build that generational wealth. And I feel empowered to share that with other families because of how blessed mine has been through the hard work of my father and the continued hard work of me and my siblings. To put a bow on this conversation, the biggest lesson I've learned from this entire journey, from my days at Arizona State to Teach for America, to being a broke flight attendant and having no purpose, from Tempe to Miami to DC and then home with my parents, the biggest lesson is to take advantage of your youth. When I was 23 and getting my feet wet in this business, learning to become a leader, I had no shame. I never cared if I messed up. I had that apprentice mindset and I didn't care if I failed. Listen, I'm growing. If I don't know how to do something, I'll just figure it out. Like Jake Fleshner of Nucleus Network says, everything is figure-outable. But as time went on, that go-get-em energy waned. And when it was time to grab a hold of the torch and take on that new role, I almost let the fear of what others were going to think stop me from doing it. I wasn't sure I was the right person for it. I wasn't sure that I could become the right person for it. But I genuinely believe that whenever you're fearful of something or have an anxiety attack about doing something in business or life, it's the devil trying to stop you from fulfilling your purpose. So I knew, based on how strong my self-doubt was, that no matter how many I can'ts or I won'ts crossed my mind, it just simply wasn't true. I had to shut down all of the negative self-talk and self-doubt and just go for it. I had to tap back into my 23-year-old mindset and start to ask myself, what's the worst that can happen? If I suck at this and we have to close the business, well, okay, I'm still young. I'll be able to bounce back, and so will the super talented and capable people who I employ. But we're not in the business of saving lives. It's not the end of the world if this doesn't work out. If life was always positive and always up with no downs, then we wouldn't appreciate the good moments, the moments of success. You have to fail in order to succeed. You have to fail in order to appreciate succeeding. You have to go through the suck in order to appreciate everything else. Have you ever met a person who's never been through any adversity in life? Yeah. Nobody likes that person. They simply just don't know what it's like for the rest of us. Everybody's path to entrepreneurship is different, and that's what makes it so special. We all have our reasons. We all have our own experiences as to how we ended up becoming entrepreneurs, and it's important to remember every moment, every milestone of that path. I'm so grateful for all the experiences that led me to where I am today. I truly believe that everything happens for a reason, and one thing leads to another until eventually you find your calling and fulfillment. I'm grateful to have a career that allows me to use all of my God-given skills, and especially the ones that almost got beaten out of me. But I'm also grateful to speak with other young bosses who are going through their journey. It's great to learn about what makes them unique and what struggles they've had to overcome. And even though from the outside looking in, it's easy to say, wow, she's so lucky. Her dad employed her and then she got handed the business and now she's doing so well. But honestly, there was so much pain, sacrifice, loss, impostor syndrome, grief, angst, anxiety, anger, contempt, frustration that led to the present moment. It most certainly wasn't all peaches and cream, and it never will be. But I'm grateful because life comes down to the emotions you feel on a daily basis. So I chose to go out there and continue to live in and further the legacy of my father. And I hope that you feel empowered to go out and live your purpose, to analyze and understand your circumstances and experiences and leverage all of that into your business and your prowess as an entrepreneur and as a young boss. Every experience you have in life and in your career has value to your entrepreneurial journey. You're more prepared than you think you are. You just have to start. Thanks for listening to another episode of Young Boss with me, Isabelle Garino. Be sure to like, share, and follow on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify for weekly episodes. And let me know your entrepreneurial journey. I want to hear from you. And remember, youth is your power.